I can do that.
Ready?
Yeah, so thank you all for attending, and also thank you to Arthur and Narek for putting this on. I'm interested to see as well because I haven't had that much opportunity to play around with the math notation in Moodle. So um, I'll
All right.
turn it over.
All right. Thank you, Keith. Thank you for organizing this workshop and encouraging us to actually to work on this and put this material together for our faculty who is interested in putting their math content online. As you might know, today's workshop consists of two parts. One is the first part about math expressions in Moodle quizzes, how to have this math formulas nicely displayed in Moodle quizzes. And the second part will be presented by Atar about electronic accessibility of math text. Well, for the electronic accessibility, it has been a big challenge for us for past few years to find something that will work. And now Atar has a great presentation about that. Now, what as we trying to redesign to some extent our Moodle courses, and prepare them for the fall, we are putting more and more content on Moodle. Of course, it's not, I'm not saying that for me, for example, I like to keep it simple and have as necessary as possible, because when we put a lot of content on Moodle, students get overwhelmed. And perhaps many of us already put lecture notes, homework, and project assignments, but this time I decided also to create a question bank on Moodle, and there were a few reasons for that. First of all, I always wanted to do that after attending Key's workshop a few years ago on how to create quizzes on Moodle, but never had time. Second of all, in my opinion, these quizzes on Moodle work very well. Second reason is Moodle quizzes work well for synchronous and asynchronous activities. And also students can get quick feedback if, of course, as instructors, we have time to type that feedback in. So this was this were main reasons. Now it turned out that Atar was also interested in this creating questions on Moodle, and we are teaching 2 sessions of the same course, Calculus 1, and we saw that if we can split work together, because it is a work to add questions to the Moodle. So just to make our work as effective as possible. It also turned out that Atar and I have the same taste in what we consider beautifully displayed mathematical formulas. So all work together, very nicely. So we started working on it, and Atar went to the next level and decided to look at that picture, broad topic about electronic accessibility. All right, so that was kind of motivation. Now, the solution to both kind of topics, Moodle question bank with math expressions and electronic accessibility of lecture notes and slides with math content, the solution to this lies in, well, one of the solutions that we came up lies in using so-called tech notations and MathJack software. There is also HTML, but Atar will be talking about that later on. So what does it mean? So this, tech notations and MathJack software. Tech notations. Now, what does tech notations mean? It means that whatever we have, let's say we have a math formula, and we type in a math expression only using the keys that are on our keyboard. let's say when we have a fraction, we don't think how to write that, you know, the numerator over denominator. We're just using our keys. And then MathJack's software takes our math expression or takes the entire text, analyzes it, and finds where that math formula is, and renders it and displays it in a way that we can see it nicely, on the display. For example, yes, one of the things, all expressions that are surrounded by, for example, by this double dollar sign or backslash square bracket open and close, or backslash and parentheses open and close. Now everything between this everything is between these symbols. When MathJack analyzes, it knows that everything that lies within these symbols, it means there should be a mathematical formula. Right? Now, for example, here's a quick example. Double dollar sign, X, caret 2, and double sign. Now, when it's written, it's typed in using only keys on my keyboard. Then MathJack's software, when it sees this kind of expression in the text, it says, aha, I know, now this should be a math expression. And this caret, it means that the expression after it should be an exponent. Right, so it takes this text in tech notations, renders, and whatever math formula displays as a math formula. So for example, this expression will be displayed as x squared. That's what we want. Or square root of x. That's you can see this here is used a different surrounding, backslash, bracket, and then there is a backslash, square root of x in the curly brackets will result in square root of x. So this might be confusing from the first sight, but once you start doing it, you really will learn it very quickly. I have been working with LaTeX notations in this LaTeX typesetting system since 2000. And I really learned very quickly. And recently, my daughter, who helped me well, actually, she did most of the work to type in questions on Moodle with this in this LaTeX format. She learned it very quickly, right? So it was like 10-15 minutes. And she got an idea what's going on. And of course, I will also provide resources where you can learn more. All right, so now I will stop sharing this screen and I will go on my Moodle page. So, and we'll show how it works there. All right, so, right. I am on my Calculus 1 Moodle page. And, right. So first of all, I would like to take to say a couple things about filters on Moodle. If you go under this administration to the filters item here and click on it on filters, you will see that there is this on the right. You will see filter settings in course. And there is a list of filters, different filters. We take many things for granted in Moodle, but in fact, everything that we do in Moodle and the way it is displayed are thanks to this different filters. And each filter has its own role. For example, this activity names auto-linking means that, well, if it is active, which is all these filters are active by default. So for example, this activity names auto-linking means that if you have an activity, let's say quiz 1, named quiz 1, and you type in somewhere on your Moodle course that homework take quiz 1, it will create auto link to the quiz 1. So students, when they click on that on the homework assignment, it will direct them to the quiz 1, right? You probably noticed that option in Moodle, and there are also other filters. These filters are administrated by our Moodle system administrators that I believe, Keith, you are for Moodle, right? And so we all depend on him, on Keith. All right, so what is it that makes our math that works with math formulas? There are different filters, but we have MathJax, that software, and tech notations. So by default, they both are on. And I suggest you to leave both of them on. Also, it is possible to have tech notation off and work only with MathJax filter. But syntax will be slightly different from what I will present today, but it's still possible. So I don't see any harm in leaving these two together and working, with the syntax that I will present. There is another there is another filter called algebra notation, and there is another one I will talk about at the end of the my presentation part. Well, so now we will concentrate on these two. As long as these two are on, everything else will be working. So once you check that these filters are on, and then we can go to this question bank. Again, under administration, I'll just workshop. If you missed the workshop on how to create quizzes, I'm not planning to go over it, how to create quizzes in general. And if you missed that workshop, I have a link in my in the presentation notes, so you can watch how to create it. Keith had recently presented that. It's again 1 hour workshop, and you can have a brush up course from video recording. But basically, you can create new question here. Well, I will just put it to workshop in a selected category. How to select category, all is explained in that workshop. So if I create a new question, I'll just show quickly, then it will bring the list of possible types of questions, such as multiple choice question or short answer or numerical question. Let's say if I will short answer, add, and I would have to name, I don't know, quiz, not quiz, sorry, question 0. Remember, we are creating questions, not quiz yet. So we're creating questions. So question 0, and here, for example, I want to say, ask what is the derivative of, let's see, I want to say x to the 4th. Now, in this editor, you can see there is a superscript. We can use that superscript, but it doesn't really come out nice, right? And there are also all other bunch of math symbols that are not here. It's very simplistic. Here you have only subscript and superscript. So what is the derivative of x to the 4th? Let's see. Remember, we want to use tech notation. So I will surround it by 2 double signs, and I will type x with caret, which means exponent, to the 4th, or y equals x to the 4th, let's say minus 3 over 4. Now 3 over 4 is a fraction, and I want it to look like a fraction. I will just add this syntax. I will provide you this guidelines for syntax. So you don't need to concentrate on the syntax now, but just the idea. So what is fraction? It consists of two parts. Numerator goes into the one and the denominator into this one, right? And so question mark. Now we have a question. Then default points and answer one here will be 4x cubed. I will type it as it is because unfortunately students will not be able to use it. But let me just get back to the student, how this question will look from the student perspective later on. Now I'll just save changes, and when I want to preview it, oops, grade should be 100%, save changes, and then I want to preview this the way how student will see it, right? So it says, what is the derivative of y? So it's nicely written, well, more or less nicely written. Y is italics, x is in italic, and 3/4. Well, in my opinion, 3/4 is a little small, that I would prefer to see it, right? And then that's why I have it here. Well, similar question. I'll show you what I've done it and what is the difference. Oh, let me just actually show you. Cancel. Just wanted maybe preview it first. Sorry, preview. Okay. Well, here the same question is written in 4 different formats. You see this one, when x to the 4th, this 4 is written using that superscript from the editor when we create it. And then from the editor, built-in editor. The second one finds a derivative of this one. It just, we have 6/17. I had 3/4. And this one, if you can see, the fraction is a little bigger, a little larger. In my opinion, this number 3 and 4 that looks the same, they are the best. But again, it all depends on the taste, you know, how you would like it to be. When I write math, I always think from students' perspective, the more, you know, it should be clear for students. They should not, let's say, you know, just what is it, 6/17. Again, so I like 3rd and 4th better. Now I'll go and show what is the difference in typing. All right, so here's when we come to edit here. In the first one, remember that 4th was a little off. I used superscript. Here I used the same syntax as I show it in the example, surrounded by $2 And here in the 3rd and 4th example, in front of fraction, well, I show display style. It's kind of, you know, I type in display style. Display style with the backslash means that make it larger. Fraction make it larger, right? So again, you don't need to do that. It's just some details, and it doesn't, you know, when you start, if you start working with this LaTeX notations, this all will put into places. But another thing that I wanted to point out, that in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th questions, the surroundings are different, right? So there's 3, but they all of them for math jacks that converts this text into math expressions. It means that whatever is in between these 3 pairs of signs, it means a mathematical formula displayed differently, right, than the text. All right, so guys, any questions? All right, so I have some other things, just details I wanted to share with you. Question 2, for example, this is a limit question. Here's this question 2. It's again short answer question. Now find the limit of x cubed of x squared minus 4 as x approaches infinity. It's written as if we would say, right, when we are at the board, but mathematically written, it can be find the limit. It's written in this way, or you can see as x approaches infinity is next to the limit and the fraction is a little small. Again, the key here in the second one, as you might guess, I use that display style syntax, and here it's not, there is no display style, without display style. And here x squared, x cubed is not even seen because, as you might guess, I used that built-in editor. Let me just show what's happening here. Again, the same question in different, written in different ways. Here, x cubed, I used superscript. For the second one, second and third one are the same, except I added this display style. You can control alignment by using this editor. For example, if first should be aligned left, second will be aligned by century, then the third sentence aligned by the right. So we will do save changes, and what students will see, where is that here? This one, century and to the right. So you can also play with that if something, you know, if you need it. Here, question 3, this is multiple choice question, and you know, it's a more complicated formula. I just, Atar shared with me. That's another good thing. We can create formulas, we can create text for formulas for questions and share with each other, and not necessarily via Moodle. Here is the one, so it's more complicated, begin cases, sign, etc. It doesn't work, right? So now, so let's, any questions so far?
So,
yeah. Question? What's question?
yeah, Narek, there's a, if someone was just starting out with tech, what's the best way to learn?
Okay, so I created this cheat, like kind of guidance for instructors, right? A quick guidance for instructors, what to do. And here are, for example, if you want A plus B, what would you type in, right? And whatever you type in, then should be surrounded by one of these pair of symbols, right? If an instructor needs some special character, one of the special characters, all they have to do is just put a backsplash in front of it. For the backsplash, they have to type backslash and then type in backslash, right? But here are something that some tech notations that are commonly used, or at least I commonly use: A plus B, a fraction, or multiplication, exponent, or the superscript or square root or cubic root. So these are the ones, but I also, and I will share it after the workshop, but also I have this latest tutorial by Jeff. He goes, you don't need to read everything, but there is a mathematical typesetting where, in my opinion, he describes it very, you know, very nicely, and you just can refer to this one if you need, for example, if you can see the sum and you need sum, you just look at that and just type in, right? So that's there are also other tutorials, but I will be happy to help. If you have any questions, just email me. I will be happy to help you how to do that, how to find the way. And again, it probably for all the questions, the things are repeated all the time, right? And it doesn't, believe me, it doesn't take too long to learn, and you don't need to memorize as long as you have this one. Now, so one thing that it's worth to mention, when students see question, I just wanted to question bank questions workshop. When students see question and they need to answer, they do not have this option to type in, because if they will type in LaTeX notations, it will not create, Bashjacks will not work here. So you can see this answer. If I type $, it will not work. So students have to type in whatever you tell them to type, right? For example, the derivative of this function is 4x cubed, right? And submit and finish, it will be considered correct, because when I created a question and here, right? When I created question and I provided the right answer, I put it 4x cubed, that would be the right answer. Now, students have to know a couple, well, of course, you can tell them that if you write 4x cubed, that would be the right answer too. It doesn't matter, as long as you and student are on the same page. I am planning to teach my students how to do that. As I mentioned from my experience with my daughter, she learned it very fast, very fast. And this is 4x cubed, and it's good for them to know what it is. Now, 4x cubed, another thing that students have to know, that if they put a space between 4 and x cubed, this Moodle will give it, will consider it as a wrong answer. So we kind of need to teach our students how to type in answers. For that purpose, I created and still continue working on it, guidance for students. For example, if their answer is A plus B, what they should do, right? So no space between characters. If they have polynomials, then they have to write it in the standard form from the highest degree to the lowest degree. What to do for the square root, for cubic root. They will have this guidance. And how I created this guidance, I just looked at the list of my questions, right? Let's see, I found the answer. I just put it here, how this should look like. And I, for example, this is x to the n minus 1, where the -1 is in the as an exponent, or it's just as goes separately. Yes, students need to learn. I will guide the students how to do that, and I'm planning to give them a quiz on notations, right? So I can share with you my quiz when it's ready. It sounds more, now after this presentation, sounds more complicated than it is, but all new things are always look complicated. Just why did I share? I'll share it again. And there is another way of how you can generate Moodle quizzes via LaTeX, which means there is this LaTeX program where you can type in the entire quiz or entire test, and it will generate, and you can export it on Moodle. But it's a kind of a little more complicated. If you have ever worked with LaTeX, then it's you can create you test in LaTeX and bring it here. There was something else I wanted to go about. Actually, I will now stop sharing this screen and I will share my notes. There are two other filters. So we use this math jacks and tech notations, but there is an algebra notation. There is a link here, algebra notation. When you, here's a link to the Moodle documentation for algebra notation. We have it on as a add-on filters. Kids added that recently, but it turned out that this algebra notation doesn't work. Algebra notation filter doesn't work properly. I guess it stopped working after Moodle 3 something version. It would be nice. What is the idea behind this algebra filter? Is, for example, if we would type in x, that we want x squared and x that caret 2, immediately will be transferred to x squared as we see it, but it doesn't work. And actually, when you see it says this page really needs improving, which means that this is kind of old filter which doesn't work anymore. There is another filter which we have a work request for that with the CTS. I don't know if it costs money. Just a second, what I did is, it's called math type. And math type for Moodle is another filter. How this filter, how it works. If we would have that filter on our Moodle, it will have kind of this view, and perhaps those of you who work in equations in Word, right, Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint, you are familiar with this. For example, for fraction, you would choose this symbol, fraction, right, and add numerator and denominator, put in OK, and it will display as you wish. You can also have handwritten formulas here, right? So you can write, and it will convert to typed in formula like this. I don't know, since we don't have that filter, I didn't get to play too much. Well, I just read this, and here, if someone, you know, image shows handwritten interface, right? Interface. There is, similar to this math type, there is a chemistry editor, right? That comes along with that math type, my understanding. So there should be something done on the system administrator side. And this chemistry editor is, my understanding is, looks something like this, but for people in chemistry. So these two kind, math type and chemistry type, go along together. But we, I don't know, so I cannot comment on this, how this one really work or it doesn't. It took some time for us to figure out how these tech notations and MathJax filter work. Right, so that's, I think this is basically what I wanted to talk in this part of the workshop. Guys, you have any questions?
Yeah, Kanarek, you said you had a link there that said generating Moodle quizzes with LaTeX. How do we get a hold of that?
Can you what?
How can we get to whatever that was linking to? You kind of pointed to it, and I don't know where it is.
I will send email with all the attachments.
Okay.
I will attach this guidance for students, for instructors, this LaTeX tutorial, and generating Moodle quizzes via LaTeX. I will send the email to all participants.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So I went a little bit overboard. All right. Now I'm passing to Atar.
Just before Atar starts, I mean, Narek, you talked about this in in relationship to writing quiz questions, but the same filter could work if you are putting up a Moodle page where you're doing lecture notes, or if you want to have a discussion forum question. Wherever you're using the editor, you can use these filters.
Yes, correct. And Atar will be talking about lecture notes with those math expressions.
Yeah. Okay. So I can. Do you want to hold for questions if there are any other questions about the quizzes and things like that? No? Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and share my screen then. Do you want to stop your side? All right. Okay. So I have some of these questions that Kanarik was sharing as well. Really quickly, I wanted to just look at one of these and just point out that along with what Kanarik said about short answer type questions, I wanted to show an example of a multiple choice type of question. MathJax, the LaTeX notation, the MathJax filters do work in the multiple choice answers if you were making multiple choice questions. But if you are, for example, if you had one of those, like, what is the derivative of x cubed or whatever, and you wrote in like 3x squared here, it would be displayed correctly as a multiple choice answer. And so I just want to point that out because it may be a reason to use multiple choice. It may make it simpler, even though that I don't like multiple choice questions. I don't like doing that, but it might make something simpler. Short answer has those problems that Kanarik talks about like it has to be in a very, very specific format. All right. The thing that I wanted to talk about is a little bit about accessibility with mathematics, and it's sort of something that's been bugging me since day one of starting at Purchase, essentially, because I remember on day one at starting here, Rebecca Oling from talked about accessibility issues, and I talked to her about it afterwards, and there was really no good answer for how do you get something like this to show up nicely in a screen reader. But actually there is, and this is something that I'm going to point out. When you right click on this expression, if it's displayed in MathJax, there are all of these sort of accessibility features that are built in, and I'm going to talk a little bit about these too as well. And so this is perhaps another reason to use MathJax instead of, like, if you want to do x and then the exponent 4, and you don't really care how it looks, and it just looks like x to the 4th power, this may be a reason to use MathJax instead, because perhaps a screen reader will read x raised to the 4th power as just x4, whereas it might read this expression correctly, and I've seen it sort of tested out. So I'm gonna talk through. I have a few slides. Hopefully, I won't run too far over time. And so, yeah, like I said, the main, this is something I've been thinking about for a couple of years now. That I had not found a good solution. I found a solution that works, I think, well enough for me now, and so I wanted to share that. It might not work for everyone. But the sort of crux of a lot of the accessibility trainings that we've seen, or at least that I remember, was essentially keep your original sources. If you write your lecture notes in Word, keep it in Word. Don't convert it to a PDF, because PDFs are bad. Right? PDFs are not accessible, and or are usually not going to be tagged or something like that. But the problem is I never write my lecture notes in Word or PowerPoint. I always wrote my lecture notes in LaTeX, very similar to Kanarik, but I've been using LaTeX since grad school, and or actually since undergrad, and this is the standard for mathematicians. That's what we use to create typeset mathematics, and unfortunately, there is no good solution within the LaTeX community itself to create accessible PDFs. So it doesn't tag the PDFs, and it doesn't create sort of good text-to-speech rules for those mathematics expressions. I know less about Word or PowerPoint in terms of what a screen reader does with the equations that are displayed in there. I have my suspicions that screen readers have issues with those. And so if you probably, if you use that, you probably may know a little bit more than me about that. But I will say something about sort of being able to convert Word or PowerPoint to more accessible formats like HTML. So the one thing that I did hear about, back then when I asked about it, was MathML. And the only thing I can say about MathML is, whether or not you know what it is, I've never met an actual person who does mathematics use MathML. Now, if you have, essentially the reason for that is it is a very clunky XML-based format that is extremely verbose. You have to type in a lot to say a fraction of X over Y or something like that. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether the accessibility community does like MathML because it's structured, and it's structured documents are easier to make accessible for screen readers and Braille readers and other output formats. But what I'm going to talk about today is mostly about HTML and also about Markdown, but I'll say something about that later. So again, if you use Word or PowerPoint, feel free to continue using that. I don't know, the value add that I can give you is I can talk about how you convert Word or PowerPoint documents that have math equations in them to using the equation editor and converting them to accessible HTML. I don't have an example of that, but I did test it out to make sure that it would work with the same sort of accessibility type features that I'm going to try and mention. But again, the crux of things is PDFs are bad and HTML is good. Okay, and the idea is that HTML is sort of structured, and so the content on the web has actually the web community has known about accessibility issues for decades now. I remember back in the 90s when I was a kid and reading about like, well, why do people use certain HTML tags instead of others? And there was lots and lots of good documentation about that. And so the web community has known about accessibility issues and has thought about accessibility issues for a long time. On Chrome, there's this extension called ChromeVox that you could use to test out as a screen reader if you want. It's quite verbose, and well, you can play around with it. It's anyway. But I probably won't actually get a chance to show it during this thing, but it's not hard to find. You just search for it on Google or something. For math, we use MathJax. Again, this is sort of the same thing that's used in Moodle. If you like to create your lecture notes in Moodle, you actually don't need to do anything that I'm talking about. Just create your lecture notes in Moodle and just surround it with the double dollar signs, and it will automatically filter that into accessible MathJax for you, actually, accessible mathematics for you. And so the nice thing is that when you type, you type exactly the same LaTeX formulas, and the thing that is the MathJax script in the background converts those formulas automatically to multiple accessible formats. All right, so you can imagine a person viewing it from a regular web browser, okay, and they see it as we see it. Someone viewing it using like a Braille reader, and there's sort of Braille web browsers that are out there that somehow that somehow sort of take the text of the page, and the user is able to read it using a Braille interface. And this MathJax will work with that as well. And then of course screen readers and other options as well. And so sort of you've seen some of these examples as well that Kennard showed, but essentially I just wanted to show off that you get so all I'm doing here is I'm right clicking on the actual mathematical expression, and there's all of this stuff that just comes up. Okay, now for us as sort of viewing it in a regular web browser, it's this stuff that comes up when you right click, but all of this is there in the background. I mean, that means that a screen reader would get all of this information if they want, you know, if it requested, and then you would actually be able to test it out with if you used a screen reader or something like that. And you can sort of talk, you know, see the different options it has, and these are different text-to-speech rules that that are sort of included in MathJax. I guess I never actually said what MathJax is, but it's essentially a JavaScript library that figures out where you're typing in math in the page, because you separate it by certain symbols, right? The $sign symbols or the bracket symbols or whatever, backslash bracket and all that. And then converts it to all of these different formats. I said something about MathML earlier, and there are again, the accessibility community does like MathML because it's structured. MathJax is smart enough to take your original LaTeX and then convert it to MathML code. And so there's all this. This is why I don't like MathML. It's it's a lot, and I don't like that. But I don't have to type that in. What I typed in was this, right? And that's much nicer, right? So I just type in \square root of x, and MathJax is able to convert it to MathML. Okay. And you know, you can display mathematics inline or on its own, right? So if you can sort of have a sentence that is that contains mathematics in the middle of it, or you could sort of separate it off on its own. And there are different commands for doing this. I'll sort of show briefly later on. So this talk is tech. So all these slides, I'm giving a talk about accessibility and talking about how HTML is a good format. I'm actually sort of using taking my own advice, and I actually created HTML slides for this. This is a library for creating slides called Reveal.js, which is really nice. It creates really nice, beautiful presentations. That's very similar. It's quite simple to use. But the secret is I actually didn't write a single piece of HTML for this talk. And I said or any of my notes or slides, I sometimes mix in a little bit if I want a little bit more control over the presentation. But for the most part, I actually just write text, and then I use this tool called Pandoc to convert it to HTML. And so essentially that's the second step of what I want to talk about. So there's the two takeaways that I want to mention. If you take anything away from this is if you have to worry about if you're worried about accessibility issues with your online content, MathJax is a good solution for that. And the second for your, at least for your equations. And the second takeaway is you can use essentially any source you write. You can write your notes exactly the same way you will already write them, whether it's basic text and you don't do nothing else, which is pretty much what I do, or if it's Word and PowerPoint, which is what, you know, I guess normal people do. And then there's this tool called Pandoc, which I'll show in a little bit about, which will convert essentially between a bunch of different kinds of formats. And I'll sort of talk about this, but you'll see like it has tons of formats that you can convert between. So you can, if you have notes that are in LaTeX, like I did, you can convert them to HTML right away. I'm creating new notes for my discrete math class, which I hadn't taught before here. So I'm writing my notes in Markdown because it's even much simpler than using LaTeX, and just including the mathematics where I need to. And I'll show an example of that in a second. Yeah, so this is what I just said about Pandoc. It has like a whole bunch of different formats that it can convert between, including your normal LaTeX and Markdown, your Word and PowerPoint sources, and others. Okay. So Pandoc is something, it's a script essentially that you would run on the command line. And so this is something you would type in on the terminal, and I'll show that, or in Mac, or if you're using a Windows machine, you would open up the PowerShell. So you'd have to install Pandoc first. It's not too hard. And then you would type in essentially these sort of commands. I'll talk through what these commands individually mean. It's not, you can find a lot of documentation on their website, and it's not so hard to get started on that. Let me just show real quick. So this is, I can't actually see this part of the screen. Oh yes. Okay, so this is sort of an example of running Pandoc on the in the terminal. This -s means it's a self-contained file, so it creates the entire HTML file with the whole thing. The double dash mathjax says essentially that you want to enable mathjax on that HTML file, which essentially just means it's going, when it creates the HTML file, it will create a particular it will include the script that it needs to. And then -o is the output file name, and then the name of the file that you want to convert. And this is the input. This is where I actually stored my text, where I typed in my lecture notes. So this is the command here. For these slides, because I wanted to use Reveal.js, it actually has a nice Pandoc actually creates that for me as well. And so you just add in this -t, which means target format, Reveal.js. And anyway, all this is just fancy stuff that it's not necessary that you do all of this, but I just wanted to point out how to actually use Pandoc. And again, most of my notes prior to this year have been in LaTeX, or handwritten. And so, okay, I can't say too much about handwritten notes. Yeah, that at some point, if you want it to be accessible, it has to be typed up again. All right. But if you have lecture notes in LaTeX, so I don't, maybe some of the math faculty do this as well. You can convert it to HTML. It might not be the most perfect formatting that it might not look like a LaTeX file, like a PDF file that's sort of created by PDF LaTeX, but it will display the equations correctly. It will look correct. And I'll sort of show an example in a second. I opened one of these things. Some environments are not supported by Pandoc, so theorem and proof environments, for example, and certain packages might not be supported. So it's really, if you're using LaTeX in a more complicated way, you may need to sort of dumb it down a little bit, bring it down to just the bare bones text and math, and that's it. And then once you sort of strip it down to that, you can convert. I guess I'll just say this might not be something that is necessary for you to do right off the bat, right? If it's not something that comes up in your class. And so I don't want to put the work on you, but just know it's not going to take a lot of work to take your original LaTeX notes and convert them to HTML, if you needed to do that, right? If, a month into the semester, you realize that someone was having trouble or accessing your notes, you'd probably be able to do this in an hour of going through Pandoc and figuring out how to convert it to HTML. And so here is a bare bones HTML page. This sort of looks like something from the 90s. It's very ugly. I don't like the way it looks, but the one thing I do like is it has, I can have my math equations in there completely sort of, with minimal effort on my part. Right? Essentially, I wrote one line that I typed in on the terminal screen. I hit enter. I even showed you doing that, and now it creates this HTML file with equations displayed, and these displayed equations are now accessible, and if you had a screen reader, it would actually be output correctly. So all of this is the other thing I want to show is okay. So I promised you I don't write any HTML. Not because I'm against HTML, but because it requires you some amount of thinking to remember how to structure HTML documents and all that. This is the source code for my talk today, right? The talk about sources and PDF being bad and MathJack's example. This is literally the source code. It is it's the simplest format that I've ever seen. Each slide, each section or slide begins with a hash symbol and then a space and then the name of the title and then just your text, and then these stars are bullet points. Right, like it's a very, very simple format to use, and then you can see when I need to actually use mathematical symbols, I surround it by the correct things. Okay, and so that's that. Let me also point out my lecture notes. What my lecture notes actually look like. Again, these are sort of the equations that I had displayed. I also had some equations inlined as well. And so this is sort of, again, very, very simple text format. I just typed in my lecture notes and then used this markdown. The format here is called markdown. There are some rules to markdown for sort of creating links, for example, and for bolding things and italicizing things, but it's quite simple, and I'm familiar with it from other reasons. I'm just sort of putting this out there as something, if you sort of have very bare bones text, it might be useful to type up your notes in Markdown. I'm using the Atom text editor here. It's a cross-platform text editor, very popular, and has a lot of packages that, including like sort of this Markdown previewer, and there's a LaTeX extension for that as well. All of this is stuff that I don't necessarily need to get into, but I can talk to you about later if you're interested in any of these things. In my discrete math notes, I actually talk to my students about LaTeX because I want my students to use LaTeX in this course. I think Yanine in the chat asked something about Greek letters, and in particular, here's an example of a Greek letter displayed in my original code, and I can show you like this pi somewhere in there. Right? It's just the backslash and then the Greek letter, and then inside whatever the delimiters are for your MathJack's symbols. All of this, a lot of this I got from this AMS webinar. I will share this link to you. So the AMS is the American Mathematical Society. They have had this series of webinars over the summer about online teaching and some of the things that a lot of mathematicians are worried about over for the fall. And one of the talks was about accessibility, and they mentioned a lot of other things that I'm not really getting into, but they did mention a few other options that people use, like Word and Google Docs equation editors, and in the context of, well, if you did use that, you can very simply convert it to HTML with MathJack's if you needed to. And so really the moral of that story was just hold on to your original sources and convert it later if you need to, right? Or it's not going to be a lot of pain to go later. You can use Pandoc to pretty much convert from anything to anything. Google Docs will output to docx format or ODT, open document format, and can then be converted to HTML as well. There was some talk about MathType. I don't know much about MathType, but Kanark was talking about it. So one of the expert there, Volker Serge, who works with the MathJack's Foundation, he mentioned that they don't really like MathType because it's very much built toward creating visual representations of the formulas, but not toward sort of semantic information that they need for accessibility purposes. And then the two downsides that I'm going to mention right now, the two things that we don't have solutions for are captioning. So you probably noticed that in your lectures, if if you created your lectures and uploaded it to YouTube, you probably noticed at some point the auto-generated captions work pretty well for a lot of things. And then when you talk about technical things, it goes haywire, right? And yeah, we just threw our hands, like there's no, I don't know of a good solution for that. There was no real good solution for sort of figuring that out either. And then the other thing that there's no real good solution for is graphs and images. So what was mentioned was there is this graphics format called SVG, which is structured vector graphics. It has some structured semantic information. It's an XML format for graphs, which is sort of for images, which is sort of interesting. I gotta say, I tested it out with the screen reader, and it's not great. It's very, very verbose, and I mean, if you create it yourself in a very nice way, and certain programs might create SVGs better than others. Let me just say it that way. If you're creating a graph, it's likely you should assume that it's going to be likely that it's hard for visually impaired people to access that graph. And so you'll have to think through other options. Again, maybe this is something, maybe you do as much as you can, and this is more than you can do. And I don't, again, I don't have an answer for this, but including alt text is an important thing for images always. And so the other thing is, well, some graphs you can just sort of include some information in a chart form somewhere else on the page that they would actually be able to access using the screen readers or something like that. I don't know. The SVG format is supposed to be better than a PNG or file because there is some, like, you can include the actual XML code in the HTML document itself. I tested it out with Desmos. So Desmos, the online graphing calculator, creates SVG. It will output to SVG, but it outputs very verbose SVG. Anyway, if this means nothing to you, I'm sorry, but I just want to say I tested it out and I tried it on a screen reader, and it was essentially reading off a whole lot of points just for the graph y equals x squared, and I don't think that would be very, very useful for someone who can't really see. Yeah, I don't know. I see a lot of activity in the chat, so I might not. I might have missed some things. Okay. Well, that's all I have. So if there are questions that I missed in the chat, you can jump in. But again, sort of the moral of the story is MathJax kind of takes care of a lot of the accessibility issues that we didn't have a good solution for before. It's been around for a while, but we just didn't. I didn't know that how to use it in a nice way. And then Pandoc is a good solution for converting between different formats. So if you have notes in one format and you want to convert it into HTML format with MathJax, that's a good solution for that as well. All right, so I'm over time. I'm sorry for that. But yeah, if you have questions, I'm happy to stick around.
Ethar, I've got a quick question. I mean, we do have Equasio on campus. We're paying for a license for. Do you have any comments on it, or how it relates to whether we need it compared to MathJax, or how they relate?
So I've never used Equatio. I just know it was mentioned somewhere in this, and so some I guess some of the other people talked a little about it. I think I don't remember too much about it,
Okay.
so I can't say in any detail. I know that let me just say for myself, I know that I like to type things, and drawing and sort of like so like using these equation editors and things like that. I don't know if Equatio is like that, but using these equation editors end up slowing me down. So I like so a solution in which I can put my entire notes in text is what I was looking for. So the minimal plain text solution that I could use. And so I think this solution that I found is sort of the best one that I can think of.
So I have a question about that SVG file format.
Yeah.
It doesn't really bother me which PNG or JPEG or whatever file format I create whenever I create my graphs, and so I don't really, imagine it'd be pretty easy to do. But is there a difference in how they would render on a mobile device? I know that most of my students are probably looking at Moodle possibly on their phones.
I tested it out, and it actually just looks better as an SVG.
Really?
Essentially, SVG is not like so PNG and all these other formats sort of give you give you a number like sort of pixels in a matrix sort of thing, right? And so if you zoom in a lot on a mobile device or whatever, it looks very pixelated. SVG is actually kind of describing a curve. It's actually really beautiful. I don't really know how. I haven't really like looked into the commands and all that, but it kind of just describes a curve, a vector essentially. And so when you zoom in and all that, it renders it. It sort of re-renders it and figures out what does that curve supposed to look like at the zoom level. And so it's kind of cool. So it actually, in my opinion, it looks better. I'd have to test it out on different sort of bandwidths and all that. These are such small files that I doubt it would be a bandwidth issue. But the SVG files are fairly small. Yeah.
Will LaTeX take a SVG file?
LaTeX with SVG, I haven't tried that out. I
was just hoping you'd save me time.
Yeah, I would assume that you could include it as include graphics, that sort of thing. But okay. Yeah, I've only tested out with HTML.
Cool.
Other questions?
If you, Amy, just to answer your question, so if you include this SVG package in LaTeX, then it will take that SVG images.
Okay.
Well, again, I want to thank everyone for showing up this afternoon, and I especially want to thank the both of you for providing this workshop for us. I know I've got some things to play around with now, so thanks very much.
Organizing.
Thank you, everyone. And if you guys need some, help to start with, just feel free to reach us out, and we can have a Zoom session together and just help you to get started with this if you are interested. Right. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Thanks again.